In a chilling spectacle broadcast across 600 inhabited worlds, galactic screens bloomed to life with a feed from a high-gravity moon in Curroth Dominion space. The air shimmered with oppressive weight, each movement drawn slow, each breath a fight beneath the gallows of alien iron. A man stood shackled, not just any man, but a human. Broad-shouldered despite the bruises, neck straight though the rope scratched his skin. His uniform was torn, caked in moon dust, but the faded patch on his arm was still clear, a coiled snake, the words, De Oppresso Liber, a Green Beret. The Curroth announcer's guttural tongue rolled out, translated across every channel in the galaxy. This is the fate of those who trespass upon Dominion territory. This is the fate of Earth's so-called warriors. The camera widened to show the crowd. Curroth civilians pressed shoulder to shoulder, eyes glinting with that peculiar blend of pride and hunger for a spectacle. Their warriors, armored in jagged plates, flanked the scaffold. The announcer gestured at the prisoner, calling him an invader, a savage, a relic of a violent planet. A hush fell when the prisoner raised his head. Staff Sergeant Daniel Reev did not look at his captors. He looked straight into the broadcast lens. There was no snarl, no trembling rage, just the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, the ghost of a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. In the silence that followed, the Curroth announcer faltered, just enough to betray the sudden chill threading through his bravado. The executioner stepped forward, claws gripping the lever. The crowd's anticipation thickened like oil. Reev's gaze never wavered from the lens. For a fraction of a second, the image seemed to tighten as though he were looking through it, past the billions of eyes, straight at someone specific. The lever dropped. The rope went taut. The Green Beret's body jerked once, then hung still. The crowd roared, a wave of alien voices crashing through the broadcast feed. The announcer exulted. The executioner bared his teeth for the cameras. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Cosmic Conquerors channel. Before we start, I hope you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you receive all the new content, and also share the story with your friends so it reaches as many people as possible. And if you have a story, write it in the comments. Maybe we'll choose one to narrate in the next video. Let's start the story. Pay attention, because there's a small detail that might change your entire perspective and awareness of life. So, there we were, folks, watching this whole thing unfold. On Earth, in a quiet coffee shop in Wyoming, the barista just kept pouring steamed milk into a cappuccino, cool as a cucumber. The patrons, they were glued to the feed on the wall, murmuring like a bunch of disturbed pigeons, but nobody was screaming or tearing their hair out. Can you believe it? A man in a ball cap even muttered something about 9 minutes, and just stirred his coffee. Talk about chill. Meanwhile, in the swanky Galactic Council chamber, light years away from that dusty moon, Commander Elise Voss was all poise and class. She adjusted the sleeve of her crisp navy jacket and took a delicate sip of her tea. Her expression was polite, almost indulgent, as she listened to the Curroth ambassador gloat, practically preening, from across the polished marble floor. His frilled throat fluttered with every boast about cutting the head off Earth's snake. Elise, being the professional she is, nodded in all the right places, even throwing in a compliment about the camera work. Really brings out the softer side of your judicial system, she said, her tone so even it took a minute for the sarcasm to land. The ambassador, bless his oblivious heart, puffed up, clearly unsure if he'd just been praised or completely roasted. We do not hide our strength, Commander Voss. No, she agreed, setting her cup down with deliberate, almost theatrical care. You've put it on full display. The broadcast, that charming little execution, just kept on playing. The camera panned over the scaffold, lingered a bit too long on the knot in the rope. Reev's boots shifted slightly on the platform, his chains clinking. And get this, he still hadn't dropped that faint smile. What do you think, at that moment, what should he have done? Snarled, begged, cried for his mama? But no, he just kept that unsettling grin. Somewhere deep in the Council's translation archives, a siren aide leaned over to her boss and whispered, "It's the smile." Her superior, a grizzled veteran of 3 border wars, shot up like a rocket and bolted from the chamber without a word. If that ain't a red flag, I don't know what is. Back on the Curroth moon, the executioner's claws tightened around the lever, the crowd's anticipation thickening like week-old gravy. Reev's gaze never wavered from the lens. For a split second, the image seemed to focus like he was looking right through the screen, past billions of eyes, and straight at someone specific. Who do you think it was? His sweetheart? His mom? Or maybe someone he was about to seriously mess with? On a mining station orbiting Crescel 4, a bunch of human freighter captains were huddled in a comms room. One of them got a single line message on a secured band, T-09 call 00. He looked at the others, gave a single nod, and started shutting down his ship's transponder. Oh. Back in the council chamber, Elise's wrist comm vibrated. She didn't even flinch, didn't break eye contact with the ambassador. Her smile, identical to Reev's, polite, faint, and utterly unreadable. The Curroth announcer's voice swelled again, practically bursting with pride, declaring the Dominion's eternal supremacy, promising that Earth's colonies would kneel or burn. Over in a different corner of the galaxy, a Cerny diplomat, who'd actually fought alongside human marines once upon a time, quietly ordered his staff to seal the embassy doors and get the emergency wormhole generator ready. Smart guy. On the scaffold, the executioner's claws were really digging into that lever. The crowd leaned forward as one, breathless. Then, a shift. Not in the physical space, but in the whole vibe of the moment. A subtle change in the prisoner's posture, the way a predator's muscles coil before it strikes. The announcer didn't notice. The ambassador didn't notice. But some species did. The pallet traders on their ice world, watching from a smoke-filled den, set down their mugs in unison. One of them muttered an old proverb about the smile before the storm. Chilling, right? The lever dropped. The rope went taut. The Green Beret's body jerked once, then hung still. The crowd roared, a wave of alien voices crashing through the broadcast feed. The announcer exulted, practically popping a vein. The executioner bared his teeth for the cameras, like some kind of space gator. Elise reached for her tea, pausing halfway. She looked at the Curroth ambassador with a warmth that might have been genuine if not for the icy glint in her eyes. 9 minutes, she said softly, almost like a hostess discussing the wait for a main course. You should call home. The ambassador blinked, his frills fluttering. Pardon. 9 minutes, she repeated, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Elsewhere, on a small Earth colony station, a mechanic shut the last crate inside his ship's hold and glanced at the station clock. 8 minutes 50 seconds. Tick-tock, folks. Tick-tock. In the depths of Curroth territory, a lone cargo drone, painted in human colors, slipped beneath the sensors of a defense satellite and parked itself in a docking bay, silent as an insect under a leaf. The broadcast panned away from the body now, showing the Curroth flag unfurled in the alien wind. The announcer proclaimed the execution, a warning to all who defied Dominion law. Elise's eyes drifted past the screens to the council chamber windows where the curve of the nearest starport gleamed under a distant sun. She thought briefly of Reev's record: Afghanistan, Mars Frontier Security, 3 black operations nobody outside Earth's defense network knew about. He'd known exactly what he was doing when he let himself be captured. That smile hadn't been for the crowd. It had been a signal. Oh, you sneaky humans! In the space between words, between beats of the council's pomp, the galaxy held its breath. The Curroth believed they had delivered a killing blow. Some species in the chamber looked at the humans and saw only calm, unreadable faces. They mistook it for defeat. Others, more seasoned, recognized it for what it was: the stillness before motion, the depthless quiet before teeth break the surface. On Crescel 4, the freighter captains were gone. Not in hyperspace, just gone. Their docks stood empty, mooring clamps still warm. In the asteroid belts beyond Vega, mining rigs shut down operations and powered their drives. Not toward Earth, but toward coordinates unlisted in any public registry. A pattern was forming, one that no alien analyst could quite name, though some whispered it smelled like war. You think it's just a coincidence? I highly doubt it. The Curroth ambassador leaned back in his chair, looking mighty satisfied. A pity your species will not understand the lesson we've taught. Oh, Elise said, her voice cool as the porcelain cup in her hands. We understand perfectly. The feed began to loop highlights from the execution: the gallows, the drop, the flag. Human media didn't cut away, but they didn't mourn publicly either. Instead, an old Earth proverb started appearing on their channels: if you strike at the king, you'd better not miss. In Curroth space, it was dismissed as bravado. In other corners, it was taken as prophecy. Oh, SpaghettiOS. 7 minutes 30 seconds. In the outer rim, a deep space relay suddenly dropped off the grid. The Curroth dismissed it as a technical fault. 6 minutes later, another, then another. By the time the pattern reached the Dominion's border fortresses, their command net was already beginning to fragment. In the council chamber, Elise's gaze never wavered from the ambassador. She was still smiling, still polite. "Have you ever seen a prairie fire?" she asked conversationally. "One spark in dry grass, and the wind does the rest. You can't stamp it out. You can only watch it run." The ambassador frowned. "Your metaphors are wasted, Commander." "Perhaps," she said. 4 minutes on the moon where the execution had taken place, the crowd was dispersing. The soldiers were laughing, trading boasts. None of them noticed the faint hum beneath their feet, the subsonic tremor of something waking far below the bedrock. Deep in the abandoned tunnels under the city, shaped charges blinked in the dark. 3 minutes. In human space, the freighter captain's ships reappeared. Not on any map, but on Curroth sensors. Not inbound, already inside their systems. Hundreds of them scattered across supply depots, fuel stations, and orbital foundries. Not warships. Every one of them bristled with hidden payloads. The pieces were already in place. How do you like that, huh? Talk about a surprise party. 2 minutes. The ambassador shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, is there something you wish to—" "1 minute," Elise interrupted, her voice low, steady. The council chamber seemed to tighten around those words. The hum of air recyclers, the faint tick of the great clock over the dais, even the shuffle of aides' feet, all of it stilled. The broadcast still played, the rope, the flag, the crowd. Reev's smile, frozen in a frame the Curroth intended as humiliation. Across human systems, that frame had been copied, printed, painted on the sides of ships. The smile wasn't defiance. It was a clock. 9 minutes after the drop. Alarms began to scream across Curroth space. Not distant alarms. Internal ones. Elise set her teacup down, folded her hands, and looked the ambassador in the eye. "Call home," she said again. And this time he understood. 9 minutes. The number hung unspoken in the chamber, though the Curroth ambassador's frills twitched in a rhythm that betrayed the thought gnawing at him. Outside the council's massive windows, ships drifted through the docks in stately lines, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, that something invisible had shifted in the room. Commander Elise Voss kept her hands folded neatly atop the table, the picture of diplomatic poise. The warmth in her voice was unchanged, but the angle of her gaze had sharpened like a blade hidden in velvet. "You see, folks, some people just know how to play the long game." Across the galaxy, the execution feed bled into news panels and jubilant Curroth commentaries. Alien anchors praised the Dominion for decisive justice, their voices rolling over each other in layered translations. On human channels, the image of Daniel Reev's faint smile repeated again and again, intercut with still frames of open prairies, wildfires under wind, and waves crashing into stone. Not a single human network called for vengeance. None needed to. Why? Because sometimes, silence speaks louder than screams. Some species watched with growing unease. On a trade station above Kalar Prime, a Zendari merchant sat at his stall and watched the human news loop 3 times before closing his shop. The last time he'd seen Earth's people look that calm, a rival guild's fleet had vanished in a single night. He left his wares behind and booked passage out of Curroth space without haggling. Smart move, pal. Really smart move. On a smaller scale, the movements were quieter, but no less deliberate. Merchant ships bearing human registry began requesting last-minute course changes. Civilian transport vessels filed mechanical failure notices and drifted into repair bays far from their posted routes. In mining colonies, shift whistles sounded early, sending crews back to their quarters. Doors bolted from the inside. Talk about taking precautions. Elise actually took lunch with the Curroth ambassador that day. She insisted on an Earth-style grill in the heart of the council quarter, its atmosphere heavy with the scent of mesquite smoke and sizzling meat. The ambassador sniffed at the rustic setting, looking a bit out of place, but allowed himself to be seated. They spoke of trivialities, council elections, trade tariffs, the peculiar weather on the ambassador's home world. Elise listened attentively, nodding at all the right moments, then asked, almost idly, about the Dominion's agricultural moons. Were the grain harvests as bountiful as last year? The ambassador puffed with pride. Even greater. Our supply lines are the envy of the spiral arm. Impressive, Elise murmured, slicing into a thick steak. A well-fed army is a dangerous one, though sometimes, she paused to savor a bite, her eyes never leaving his, the most dangerous armies are the ones you never see coming. He laughed, though the sound wavered. Are you suggesting Earth has such an army? I'm suggesting, she said lightly, that you shouldn't assume the absence of noise means the absence of teeth. Zing. Elsewhere, a young Zyron diplomat sat in her private quarters, staring out at the Sol System's distant speck on her NAV screen. She'd studied humans at the Academy, learned their wars and strange idioms. She knew enough to recognize that the execution hadn't been a show of dominance. It had been the lighting of a fuse. As she hesitated over her comm, a secure channel pinged, a simple glyph used only once before, decades earlier, when a Terran strike team had appeared without warning to rescue hostages from deep within Ziran territory. The glyph meant, "Stay out of our way." Message received, loud and clear. 3 minutes into the 9. On the Curroth moon, where Reev's body still swung from the gallows, the crowd had begun to disperse. Soldiers lit torches in celebration, the smoke curling into the heavy air. None noticed the shadowed figure in a mechanic's uniform slipping into a side corridor beneath the square. His hands moved with steady precision, pressing a palm against an access panel that shouldn't have recognized his fingerprints. And yet, the lock clicked open. Oopsie. 5 minutes. The ambassador was midway through an anecdote about Dominion naval parades when a faint tremor shivered through the ground beneath the grill. Diners glanced around, puzzled, then dismissed it as a passing cargo hauler overhead. Elise didn't look away from her plate. Far across Curroth space, in a refueling depot orbiting their industrial capital, a cargo freighter marked as out of service drifted lazily toward an open dock. Inside its holds, machinery purred quietly, waiting. The dockmaster scanned the freighter's ID, frowned at the outdated manifest, and waved it through. Another oopsie. 6 minutes. A smuggler on the edge of the Veil Nebula found himself intercepted by a human patrol craft. Expecting an inspection, he bristled, until the Marines didn't bother with his cargo. Instead, they borrowed his long-range comm array. The smuggler watched, baffled, as a short burst of encrypted data left his ship. The human officer offered him a polite nod and a warning to steer clear of Curroth space for a while. You gotta love polite pirates, right? 7 minutes. The ambassador dabbed at his mouth with a napkin, smiling thinly. I must admit, Commander, your people are restrained. I expected more outrage. Outrage, Elise said, setting her utensils down, is a luxury for those without options. We prefer preparation. His frills twitched in confusion, but before he could press, a server approached their table, whispering something in Elise's ear. She nodded once, waved the server away, and returned her attention to him with the same serene smile. You just know something big is brewing when they're that calm. 8 minutes. In orbit over the Curroth agricultural moon of Real, a series of maintenance drones detached from the underbelly of a human-flagged cargo hauler. The drones moved with unhurried grace toward the moon's primary comm array. The Curroth technicians below saw the silhouettes against the sky and assumed it was scheduled work. Oh, if only they knew. On a backwater ice world at the edge of Dominion influence, a band of Palak miners crowded around a single battered screen in their mess hall. They watched the timer in the corner of the execution replay tick toward the 9-minute mark. The eldest among them, scarred from the border skirmishes of his youth, muttered something in his own tongue, an old warning about wolves in warm sunlight. He rose from the table, began gathering his crew. Those old-timers, they always know. 9 minutes. Alarms bloomed across Curroth space. Not from the borders, but from within. Unidentified energy signatures inside shipyards. Sudden loss of comms from 3 major defense outposts. Power failures rippling through orbital foundries. At the grill, Elisa's wrist comm vibrated again. She glanced at it this time, then looked up at the ambassador with eyes that had gone cold as vacuum. That would be your home fleet calling, she said. They'll want to speak with you, If they still can. His hands twitched toward his own comm device, but before he could answer, the building's lights flickered. Somewhere distant, sirens began to wail. In the council chamber, aides scrambled for data feeds. The looping execution footage was abruptly replaced by a stark, simple image, Reev's smile, frozen mid-frame, overlaid with the human glyph for done. What a mic drop! On the moon, the mechanic in the underpass pressed the final sequence on a portable console. The shaped charges deep beneath the gallows armed silently, their signal masked beneath the ambient hum of the city's power grid. Above, soldiers laughed around their torches, oblivious. Ships across Curroth space shuddered as internal systems went haywire. Munitions bays sealed shut, engines stalling, navigation arrays rebooting into dead code. In the skies above their capital, the traffic pattern dissolved into chaos as freighters ignored control tower commands, maneuvering into precise, unnatural formations. The ambassador's comm lit up with a barrage of urgent messages. Each one a fragment, distorted audio, static, abrupt silence. His frills flattened in alarm. What have you done? Elise reached for her glass of water, sipped, and set it down. We don't start fights, Ambassador. But if you put a rope around one of ours. She let the words trail off, the weight of them hanging heavier than the gallows on that distant moon. A sudden flash from the viewport caught his eye, a bloom of light from one of the orbital docks. Too far to hear the sound, but the sight alone made his throat tighten. He recognized the pattern of the explosions, though he could not place why. That's not war, Elise said softly, following his gaze. That's the clock starting. Far above the council world, in the silent dark between stars, human fleets emerged from shadow. Not massive war armadas. The galaxy would have seen those coming, but lean, efficient strike groups hidden in asteroid fields and mining shells. They moved without flourish, without fanfare, slipping into pre-assigned vectors like pieces on a board. The ambassador pushed back his chair, the scrape loud in the quiet restaurant. This is madness. Elise's smile returned, faint as the one Reev had worn. No, Ambassador. This is math. And boy, was it a complicated equation. Somewhere in the depths of Curroth territory, a Dominion patrol ship's captain stared at his dead console, realizing too late that the faint vibration under his deck plates was not a mechanical fault. It was the heartbeat of something placed there long before. That's a nasty surprise, isn't it? In the human colonies, children played under skies untouched by war. Their parents glancing now and then at the news feeds, watching the reports of technical failures spread like ink through water. No one panicked. No one rushed. They knew what was coming. The ambassador's comm beeped again, louder this time. Insistent. He fumbled it open to a single image, the Dominion's Third Fleet flagship, lights dark, drifting powerless against the pull of a nearby moon. Elise rose, smoothing her jacket. I'd recommend you answer that. Your 9 minutes are up. He stared at her, frills trembling, words caught in his throat. She left him there, stepping out into the warm afternoon light of the council quarter, the scent of mesquite smoke still in her hair. Somewhere above, the first shadows of the human fleet passed silently across the sun. The first strikes bloomed in silence. No thunder, no flare of approaching fleets, just points of sudden light over Curroth shipyards, as if new stars had been born and died in the same heartbeat. From the bridge of the Dominion flagship Velour, Admiral Che Rick watched the tactical map fracture into red warnings. At first, he thought the enemy had slipped past the border defenses. Then he saw the vectors, inside their own perimeter, embedded deep in the heart of their territory. These weren't invaders breaking in. They'd been here all along. Talk about a Trojan horse, but way, way bigger. On Velan, the agricultural jewel of the Dominion, firestorms swept the grain seas in long, deliberate arcs. From orbit, the burning fields formed shapes, 2 curved lines, and a downward slash. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone who had studied Earth, the skull and crossed blades of the first Marine raiders. You gotta admit, that's some serious artistic flair for a declaration of war. In the council chamber, the Curroth ambassador's voice pitched higher with each incoming report. Civilian casualties. You're killing. Evacuated, Elise interrupted without looking at him. She was standing now, eyes fixed on the feed streaming across the chamber's holos. He blinked. Pulled them. You. Every non-combatant we could find. Every child, every elder, every unarmed worker. That's the difference between us, Ambassador. We end wars. You prolong them. Burn. On the mining moon of Kartesh, orbital defense platforms shuttered, their gun turrets freezing mid-rotation. Inside the control centers, crews slammed at panels that no longer responded. Bolted doors sealed them in. Ammunition bays locked tight, engines spinning down into silence. A Dominion engineer pried open a maintenance hatch and froze at the sight of human ordnance nested like wasp larvae in the conduits. Charges wired to blow only after the crew was safely in lifeboats. See? Precision, not genocide. They even send lifeboats. Above the industrial capital, a refinery complex erupted in petals of white plasma. The shockwave painted the clouds, casting the city below in a light that felt more surgical than savage. Entire power grids failed in perfect sequence, leaving the city intact, but blind, deaf, and helpless. Elise's comm fed her a steady stream of confirmations, operations unfolding exactly as planned. Years of placement, infiltration, and patience paying out in minutes. The Dominion had thought they'd been watching Earth. All the while, Earth had been studying them, planting seeds in their soil, wiring their walls with quiet inevitability. A voice crackled through on a secure line, low and calm. "Commander, package confirmed." Her throat tightened just a fraction. "Status: alive and en route. No deviations." The ambassador must have read something in her face. "You're speaking of the soldier." She didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. On the world of Darren, a Dominion officer stumbled through the smoke of a shattered command post, only to find a comm screen flickering with an unfamiliar face. Daniel Reev, eyes steady, lips curled in that same faint smile. The officer froze, understanding too late that the execution had been more performance than punishment. It was all a show, folks. A very expensive, very destructive show. Elise moved through the council chamber like a conductor before an orchestra. Her voice was steady, giving instructions to fleets not visible on any official map. To the untrained ear, her words could have been about trade convoys or humanitarian aid. To those who knew, every phrase was a blade's edge. The ambassador leaned forward, his voice shaking. "You are committing genocide." "Not genocide," she corrected. "Precision. We're burning the sword, not the hand. You can thank me later." She's got a point, you know. Across Dominion space, the pattern repeated. Shipyards imploded, their frames folding inward like collapsing lungs. Comms networks dissolved into static. On some worlds, water purification plants ceased function. On others, weapons depots flooded themselves with inert gas. It was as if the Dominion's infrastructure had simply decided it no longer wanted to serve its masters. You go, infrastructure. The alien council members not aligned with the Dominion began excusing themselves. A Luxor delegate claimed an urgent planetary emergency and left in a blur of pale robes. The Zyron diplomat, who had suspected the truth earlier in the day, merely inclined her head toward Elise before slipping out. They knew when to run, unlike some people. Panic spread faster than the destruction. Curroth warships turned on each other, mistaking any unscheduled movement for human infiltration. Civilian transports jammed the hyperspace lanes, some colliding in their haste to flee. Through it all, Elise maintained the same careful, almost courteous demeanor. She spoke softly to the ambassador as another feed showed the Dominion's Third Fleet immobilized, adrift in perfect formation. "Every ship's engine's dead." "You could have stopped this," she said. 9 minutes ago." His frills flared in anger. "We will rebuild. We have the resources, the allies." "You have ghosts," she said, cutting him off. "And we have memories. Ours are longer." Oof. That's a deep cut. In orbit over Velan, the last of the fires burned themselves out, leaving the skull emblem charred into the soil. Overhead, a small human corvette drifted away, silent, disappearing into the black before any Curroth vessel could close the gap. From the flagship, Admiral Che Rick sent a final coded burst to the capital before his bridge went dark. In his last moments of light, he wondered how long they'd been inside his systems. Years, perhaps, maybe since the first trade delegation, smiling and shaking hands. He never saw it coming, did he? Elise stood before the Council's main display as one by one the red blips marking Dominion control points winked out. Not conquered, erased. The ambassador's voice had gone quiet now. He watched in numb disbelief as entire sectors went dark. "Why?" he whispered. She turned to face him fully for the first time, her eyes unblinking. "Because you thought the broadcast would break us. Because you wanted to teach us fear. And because you touched one of ours." He sagged back in his chair, and for the first time, Elise saw not arrogance, but the brittle edges of a man who understood the scale of his mistake. Reports streamed in, Dominion border worlds surrendering without a fight, requesting human oversight for evacuation. Rebel factions inside Curroth space declaring independence, emboldened by the sudden vacuum of power. It was not victory. Not yet. But it was momentum. And momentum, my friends, was a weapon all its own. On one of the outermost Dominion worlds, a child peered up from a crowded evacuation transport as the planet's defense satellites exploded one after another, a chain of blossoms in the night sky. She didn't know who had done it or why, only that the sky had never looked so bright. In the quiet after the first wave, Elise walked from the chamber into the antechamber beyond. A junior aide fell into step beside her, whispering updates. She acknowledged each with a nod, her mind already on the next set of targets. Behind her, the ambassador remained seated, staring at the blank screens where his empire had been. Far above, in the void between systems, human fleets adjusted their vectors. The first fires had done their work. Now came the real cutting. Elise stopped before the viewport, the stars crisp and cold beyond the glass. She thought of Reev, not the moment of the rope, but the moments before, when his eyes had held something more than defiance, promise. She allowed herself the smallest exhale, then signaled the next phase. The ambassador's comm pinged again in the empty chamber. No one answered. In the space between those stars, something moved, vast, unseen, and already too close. The Dominion's war map was no longer a map at all. Just a scatter of dying signals, static-laced channels, and a widening silence where whole fleets had once been. Elise Voss stood in the half-lit command deck of the Resolute, her posture a blend of calm and coiled purpose, the kind of stance that left subordinates unsure whether to relax or brace. Outside the viewport, a Curroth defense station tumbled slowly, its hull intact but lifeless, its lights extinguished as if the stars had simply forgotten it existed. The surviving members of the Galactic Council were demanding explanations. Some calling for ceasefires, others urging immediate retaliation against Earth. Elise ignored them. She was studying the grainy looping footage on the side screen, the broadcast that had begun it all. Daniel Reev standing beneath the rope, that faint, deliberate smile on his bruised face. The Curroth had thought it defiance. Elise knew better. It had been a signal, one that had lit up contingency plans that had been sleeping for years. She hadn't been in uniform the day they'd placed Reev in the Dominion's path. That role had belonged to someone else long since retired. But the operation, codenamed Lazarus, had been passed down from one hand to the next like a relic, guarded in whispers, sharpened over decades. Its principle was simple enough. If the Dominion ever took one of theirs in public, Earth wouldn't just answer. Earth would erase. Boom. The bridge doors slid open, and Admiral Mark Rennick stepped inside. His boots still dusted with the pale grit of Relan. He didn't salute, old habits from Shadow Wars where formalities were a liability. Instead, he handed Elise a datapad. "You'll want to see this." She scrolled through the feed. A Curroth city, smoke curling lazily over rooftops. Civilians clustered in evacuation zones. Human medics moved among them, passing out water and tending wounds. No chains, no forced relocations, just quiet, methodical relief. And on the far side of the frame, half in shadow, Daniel Reev himself, unshackled, alive, speaking softly to a child clutching his sleeve. "They didn't hang him," Rennick said, his voice low. "They hanged a machine. Biosynthetic, full neuromimicry, right down to the heat signature. Swapped him in 36 hours before the event." Elise kept her eyes on the image. "The public thinks he's dead." "They will," Rennick said, "until you decide otherwise." Her gaze drifted from the datapad to the black outside the viewport. "The ambassador doesn't know yet." "Not sure it matters," Rennick replied. "His government's falling apart. We've got warlords carving up sectors, colonies declaring independence. Curroth High Commands not answering half their own distress calls. Elise's lips curved. Not a smile, not quite. That's the thing about predators. When the alpha stumbles, the pack tears itself apart. You heard it here first, folks. Below them, the dark curve of the Curroth capital hung against the stars. The city lights were dimmed now, a faint lattice over an ocean of shadow. For generations, that planet had been the heart of Dominion power, the place from which edicts had rolled outward like thunder. Now it was a hushed room with the fire burned down to embers. Final phase? Rennick asked. She considered the question. Finality was a human illusion. There was always another move, another angle. But the last public act that matters. We finish it clean, she said at last. No cities leveled, no slaughter for spectacle, just nothing left to rebuild. Rennick nodded once, turned to relay the orders. In the ruins of the council chamber, the Curroth ambassador sat alone at the great table, the other delegates long since fled or hiding. His comm chimed, but he didn't touch it. The feed played automatically. Elise's face, calm and composed. "Ambassador," she began, her voice clear in the cavernous hall. "This is the part where you beg, where you offer terms, resources, tribute. And maybe in some other war that would work. But this one was never about territory or power. It was about a man you thought you could break in front of the galaxy." She let the pause stretch long enough for the sound of his own breathing to fill the room. "We don't break. We bury." Wow. The next sequence of events unfolded with the inevitability of a falling stone. In orbit over the Curroth capital, 3 human vessels slid into synchronous position, their drives humming with a low resonance that made the very air inside them seem to tighten. Below, planetary shields flared once, twice, then guttered out as embedded human code unraveled their control cores from the inside. On the surface, military command centers winked offline one after another, not with explosions, but with quiet system deaths. Power routing away into voided circuits. The streets filled with murmurs rather than screams. The people didn't yet understand that their world was no longer theirs. Imagine that. Your world just, poof. In the Resolute's war room, Elise stood over the tactical display, watching the lights die. Each was a pulse on a vast, fading heartbeat. Rennick returned, his tone clipped. All target nodes neutralized. Civilian grids stable. Supply caches gone. Pull the fleets back to shadow positions, she said. Let them sit in the dark a while. Long enough to remember the shape of fear. And Reev? Rennick asked. She didn't answer immediately. In the silence, the hollow feed shifted to show him boarding a transport with a cluster of Curroth refugees, blending into their number like another displaced soul. His face was half hidden, but the set of his shoulders was unmistakable. He was already leaving, disappearing into the currents of a galaxy that would never stop looking for him. "We'll bring him home when the time's right," she said. Finally, the ambassador's last message came through on a scrambled channel. Pleas for talks, assurances that the Dominion would never again target human forces. Elise read it once, then deleted it without reply. Cold-blooded, but effective. As the hours passed, the pattern of collapse accelerated. Dominion patrols defected, their commanders vanishing into deep space with whatever ships would follow them. Allied species that had feared the Curroth for centuries now sent quiet envoys to Earth. Their messages full of words like partnership and protection. The void the Dominion left behind was vast, and everyone knew the wolves who had made it could.